What's going on, guys? Welcome to another video, and this is not going to be about Brave Extras or any gacha games. This is actually going to be about a game that I discovered in my childhood way back in the day when I used to play on the Sega Game Gear. I know, right? That's a long time ago now. Most people don't even know, most people don't even know it even exists. But there was a competitor to the Game Boy Color, or Game Boy just the regular itself, and it was called the Sega Game Gear, and it was gigantic. It was huge. But it was nice. There was a lot of things that it didn't have compared to the Game Boy, though. But there were other games that it had, kind of how it is today, where Xbox has certain games and PlayStation has certain games, and it's kind of the same thing, where there are some games maybe you couldn't play on the Game Boy. For example, I believe, now this could all be just, this is all just my memory. There was a Ren and Stimpy game that was on the Game Gear, and Ren and Stimpy was my favorite things when I was a kid growing up, and they had a Ren and Stimpy game on the Game Gear. It was hard, very hard, for being a kid, of course. If I played it now, of course it wouldn't be that bad probably, but back then, yeah, those kind of games were special because you couldn't play them anywhere else. Like Sonic, for example, you could play Sonic on the go on your Game Gear. I used to play Sonic all the time while you were on the go. I was terrible at it, but I was just a kid, so it's acceptable, right? It's like a competitive thing that we're like the same thing we have now. So in the end, I just want to show you guys some things that I found. I don't remember how I found it. I was just kind of like looking through some stuff, and it somehow popped up. So it was nice. I was like, oh, this kind of looks familiar. The music doesn't sound. I couldn't find the actual music, by the way. I had to use the Genesis version, which is there's a Genesis version, there's a Game Gear version. The one I'm talking about is gonna be the Game Gear version, which is inferior to a lot of people apparently, but it's still good. So this kind of looks like it's basically it's just a fighter. Like nowadays, it's nothing special at all. Of course, it's just a generic fighter. But back then, there weren't as many generic fighters as there were now, where this looks a lot like like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or something. But they all have all the characters in the game have their special moves, just like how Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat would have. But back then it was pretty easy because there's only two buttons really. There's like two buttons. It's like a two-button game really. So it's a lot easier to get those moves out than say nowadays where you have to do a whole bunch of stuff to get combos. Back then it was not that hard. So yes, it looks plain, but if you're a fan of the series like I was, and a lot of people call it like a clone of Power Rangers, but kind of like, yes, at the very beginning kind of was, but then they started making their own thing. Like they have their own story. It's not even anywhere near close to Power Rangers after you start looking into the story and everything. So yes, on the surface, everybody's gonna just say that it's a Power Rangers clone, but in the end, I think it's pretty interesting. I actually loved VR Troopers more than Power Rangers, more than Power Rangers when I was growing up. Even though I liked them both when I was growing up, I had all the action figures and things like that. But I think that VR Troopers was just more interesting to me. The enemies were more compelling and things like that. You can see one of the enemies here in the shown. He's one of the main villains in the whole series. You can actually play as him. That's one of the best parts about this, and it's kind of unheard of, being able to play as the enemies or playing as the antagonists or the villains. You can actually play not in the story mode, of course, but you can play as them in the arcade mode, or even whatever you want to call it, where it doesn't matter. So you can play as anyone in the game, in the arcade mode, or like the battle mode. So you can play as them. It's pretty interesting. I think that being able to play as the enemies it was this very special thing back then, because you're like, oh man, why can't I play as them? Well, you can't here. This should work. Yeah. So here's some slides. I found a GIF somehow. I don't know who compiled this, but it's a pretty interesting GIF. And there's some clips here from the game. It's, of course, like I mentioned, there's a Genesis version, which is far superior because it's on an actual cartridge compared to this, where it's just compressed. It's like a compressed game. It looks way different. If you compare the Genesis version to this version, it's way different. The music's, well, you're listening to the Genesis music now. I couldn't find the Game Gear music whatsoever. It just doesn't exist. But I will always like this version more. I'm trying, maybe someday I'll be able to play it in person someday. Maybe I'll be able to find my Game Gear wherever it may be. I have no idea. May still exist somewhere in my house. May not. But I think that it's a very interesting game for the time period. Nowadays, if I played it, it would just be, you know, if anyone picked this up right now, it would just be generic fighters to them. But back then, it was like, wow, I get to play a game for VR Troopers. It's like a lot of things in the game, like Ghostbusters or, you know, a Power Rangers game or something like that. Your favorite TV show, and you'd be able to play the game. It was special back then. Nowadays, it's like whatever. Oh, I can play Spider-Man. You know, Spider-Man this and Spider-Man that. It's nothing. It's not as. It's still special, but it's not like oh my god, kind of thing anymore. It's just like, oh, there's another Spider-Man game. Oh, there's another Batman game. It's not like if there was like a Batman game way back then, oh my god, Batman, I want to play Batman. Stuff like that, right? So, yeah, so I wanted to look at some of that stuff, and now I want to look at some reviews for back then. Because I found some reviews, it's going to look a little cropped. I couldn't get it to fit right, but there's some cropping going on. But, so there's the intro, but that's not really what we're looking at here. So, one person already described this as a pretty alright fighter. 7 out of 10 is pretty good. Oh, I think it's a 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 is pretty good, and he has basically the same thing. Basically the same experience as me, where he just found it one day. And I think that's about the same thing as me. So, 7 out of 10 is pretty good. And then it's kind of like varies. Like some people are giving 80 out of 100, which is phenomenal. You know, it varies between person. Of course, there's some people, most people are saying this is like very average, you know, mediocre game, but it's okay. The German ones are basically saying like, hey, I didn't know VR Trooper game existed, and then when I found it, it was pretty decent, kind of thing. That's basically what these two are saying. At least the first one. I'm assuming the second one's probably saying the same thing. It's like, oh, I didn't know that it existed. It's an average fighter, stuff like that. That's what it's saying. And there's just some people who didn't like it, of course. There'll be, for a lot of games, it's always like that, right? There will be some people that don't like it, but it was an average fighter for most people, but for me, I didn't know of any average fighters. I didn't grow up on a lot of those other consoles that a lot of people grew up on. I had the Game Boy, I had the Game Gear, that's really all I had. So, in the long run, I didn't have any of the stuff that a lot of people had. Like they were playing, a lot of people were playing Street Fighter and stuff like that. I didn't have Street Fighter or anything like that. So, I'm just glad that I was able to find this game again, and this is what I was talking about, by the way, when it wasn't going to look great. But I'll just tell you that the scores are between 64 and 80. There's also 30 in there, but you know, all these reviews are like from like 1990s. It's fun to actually see that you can actually find reviews from like 20 years ago that are still here. I don't know where they would go, but they're still here. So, yeah, I think that it depends on their experience, if they like the VR Troopers initially, or they just like the fighting game in general. They like the flow of the game. There are some people that didn't like the flow of the game. There are some people that did like the flow of the game. Stuff like that. It's the same thing for any game. Any kind of game will get a bad score sometimes. No game will have a perfect score on any website. You'll probably find at least one bad review somewhere for something. And this is kind of like the same story. So, I was just really glad I was able to find this game. And I don't really know what else to say other than I'm just glad I was able to find it. And just listen to the music and watch gameplay on YouTube. There's lots of gameplay on YouTube. Maybe we can actually find some YouTube gameplay. I can't play it, but let's see if we can find some gameplay. So we've got just a game here, and when you press start, you have 3 options. One is story mode, one is battle, I guess that's what it's called, battle game. That's kind of weird. And the other one is just option. So you had a selection screen here. I mean, it's terrible cropped, I know, but you can get a general idea of what the gameplay is like. It's just that as you expect. But the moment I saw this, I was like, I know this looks very familiar. I know I used to play this or something along those lines. And yeah, you can play as any of the characters in the game as in battle game. Whatever. That's such a weird thing to say, like battle game. But yeah, that's really it. This is the game. You progress through certain stages in mode. It's like you fight them over and over again until you run out of time period. It's like just keeping on your toes. Endurance round, whatever you want to call it. You can't lose, you can't win. It's just getting better score. So yeah, that's about it, guys. I know this video is not really coherent. I didn't really mean it to be coherent. I just wanted to talk about one of my childhood games that I found again. That's all I wanted. So this is not a coherent video at all. But I hope you guys at least enjoyed. Maybe some of you guys have found childhood games of your own. So maybe if you found some childhood games of your own in the past few years, please let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave the comment down below if you did find a childhood game of yours recently, and if you haven't, maybe everyone in the comment section can help you find it. Maybe you can describe it. Say, oh, it was this thing happened and this thing happened, and maybe we can find it. There's also a Reddit for that, by the way. There's actually a Reddit out there that'll help you. Well, most of the times they'll help you find the game that you lost or can't remember. There's actually a Reddit for that. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in the very next video, and I'll see you in the next one.